by the Florida Association of Broadcasters and this station.
From the heart of Central Florida, you are listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. So glad to be with you once again here in our beautiful Central Florida neighborhood, where the problems we have, they're not that hard to solve. We just got to roll up our sleeves and work together as neighbors. We can't focus on tribalism. We can't focus on partisan groupthink. That's where we got into the problems. The solution will come when we move away from politics and look at our human neighbors as we see ourselves, as deserving the same dignity, as deserving the same freedom, the same respect that is not ours to take or meddle with. That's what A Neighbor's Choice is all about, and I'm so glad that we could be here together again live. And I hope that all of our friends, whether you're listening in from Orlando on News Radio WFLA over there, or WHBO 1040 AM here in Tampa, we are glad to have you live on radio with us. And then also our following online on Facebook and YouTube. So glad to see everyone here joining us on our video stream as well. And our first guest is someone who I think is got a fantastic story. And I wanted to get him on because of the fact that in the media right now, there's a lot of discussion about that there are people in prison right now who are nonviolent offenders, people who are not a threat to society. They did things related to vice, right? Not trying to harm anybody with any significant threats against property or people's lives. They're in there for vice issues or for nonviolent associations with folks that were doing bad things or selling things or what have you. And right now they're sitting in a situation in prison where they are in a dangerous situation where sanitation's not the best, where hygiene is not the best attention, where people are not able to space out and have proper social distancing and proper nutrition, proper sunlight, and you've got a potentially lethal virus that's coming around and could really spread like wildfire in these situations. So the idea that we would put people in a dangerous, life-threatening situation for some kind of nonviolent thing they did in their youth is something that I think goes against everything that makes America what it's supposed to be. And I think we should strive to have a different kind of society. So I want to have our guest. He's an attorney and he's a professor at Georgetown University, Shon Hopwood. How you doing, Shon?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I know you're very busy, so we don't want to keep you too long, but we want to get into what you've been up to. You are someone who talks a lot about criminal justice. That's what you do in your work as a professor, as a speaker, all around the country, and I know you're involved with a lot of the efforts in the White House. So tell me, what's on the front line agenda of what you've been working on in that space?
Well, I'm monitoring things that are happening in the prison system and thinking about the men and women that are inside there and the men and women that work in the prisons and the men and women and children that are in the surrounding communities of those prisons. And I'm just fearful as to what's going to happen given the threat posed by COVID-19. Unlike most lawyers, I have some practical experience and know what it's like to be in prison because prior to becoming a lawyer and a law professor, I served nearly 11 years in federal prison for 5 armed bank robberies I committed in my early 20s. And I can tell you that in no federal prison is there even the remote possibility of social distancing and being able to protect people from once the COVID gets in there from mass outbreaks. And that's kind of what we're seeing all over the country, is that in jails and prisons across the country, lots of people are getting sick.
And you have a remarkable story. You are someone who, again, you went from being in prison yourself to turning your life around, and now you're a professor, nationally regarded, even around the world, too. So tell us how you got that journey. How did you get to that point from where you were to where you are now?
Well, I had a lot of time on my hands. So part of what happened was I found a passion for the law and started writing legal briefs for other prisoners while I was in prison, and had 2 cases granted by the Supreme Court of the United States, which is just not the norm for people litigating criminal cases from a federal prison. And so that kind of lit in me a fire and a passion for the law and for helping people. And while I was there, I, probably read 4,000 to 5,000 judicial opinions, and kept litigating cases. And then when I got out, I went to law school and eventually clerked for a federal judge, and am now a law professor at Georgetown.
And that's where you are today. Now, you're someone who also, I've seen you being engaged with the White House. What have you been doing in the White House in this space, and what's happening now given this new circumstance?
Yeah, so I worked with the White House on advocacy related to the First Step Act, which was a bill that passed Congress late 2018 and was then signed by the president. And I was actually in the Oval Office the day the president signed the bill. And I'm very much a believer in second chances, that yes, we have to hold people that commit crimes and are convicted accountable, but that we don't have to send them to prison as long as we do, and that when they have served their time and come out, that we offer them a true second chance at a life. Not just because they're deserving of it as human beings, but also, if people get out and don't feel like they do have a second chance, they're much more likely to commit new crimes and create new victims of crime. And so it's not just redemption, it's also good public policy.
Yeah, that's the thing that, my whole principle is I talk about the foundation of Western law. What we appreciate so much is when it's actually implemented. Unfortunately, it's hard to live up to, it seems like lately. But one of the things that I think is important is this idea of habeas corpus, present the body. You have to have a fair trial. You can't just put someone in a dungeon without a trial, as they did in older times. But on the other side of that, to me, that word habeas corpus, present the body, I also think about, well, present the person who's an injured party for the actions. So if you don't have an injured party, I don't think we should be putting people in prison cages, especially for the long sentences that we're doing. That, to me, strikes against the very heart of the founding of this nation, and it strikes, to me, against the heart of law and order, because if you can criminalize one nonviolent choice, then it's up to the whims of the voting crowd about criminalizing another nonviolent choice. If we can say that we're going to criminalize people and put people away sometimes for life for being involved with marijuana distribution, well then, of course, alcohol is game, caffeine is game, corn syrup is game. A lot of things that are extremely destructive for families should be technically game if the public will go for it. And I just don't think that's a good way to have law and order.
Well, yeah, at some point, our Congress just failed to consider the value of our individual liberty. Up until, the 19th century, there were a few hundred federal offenses, and up until 1970, there were a few hundred federal offenses. Now, no one, not even the Department of Justice, knows for certain how many federal offenses there are. It's estimated there are over 5,000 things that are illegal as a matter of federal law, and that there are hundreds of thousands of administrative regulations that also carry criminal penalties. And when you criminalize everything and write broadly worded statutes and give all of the discretion to federal prosecutors, that's not a system that works well. I say this, and it's not being glib. If anyone had to withstand a year of scrutiny from the federal government, very few Americans would come out unscathed. And that, there are so many things that people break federal law every day and have no idea they're doing it, that if we could actually enforce all of that federal criminal law, most people would be in prison. And it was never supposed to be that way. The criminal law was supposed to be a state issue. States handle that, not the federal government. And I think the framers, who cared a great deal about protections for criminal defendants, because the first 8 amendments in the Bill of Rights, has a number of amendments geared towards making it difficult for the federal government to lock up large numbers of people. And I think the framers would be astounded to see a federal prison population of 180,000 people, and the fact that the United States, the land of liberty, leads the world in the rate in which we incarcerate people.
Yeah, I mean, you imagine George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, these folks were drinking raw milk from their community farmer, and now they have a country where you go to prison, federal prison, if you sell raw milk, and you don't do it in a way that lies and says it's for pet food only. We'll continue with Shon Hopwood. He's a professor at Georgetown University. He has a remarkable life story, and he's with us live as we unpack the critical story happening in our nation's prisons, where people, for nonviolent victimless choices, are stuck in a potentially lethal situation where they cannot practice social distancing while a pandemic continues to rage. We'll continue in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Mom always told us to eat our fruit. Better way to keep mom happy than to take Fortify Organic Blue-Green Superfood. Studies indicate people who consume the most fruits and veggies each day are the healthiest with the best improved immune system. This product was created and designed by board-certified Dr. Michael Lang. You know him from the program Ask the Doctor. During this viral pandemic crisis, Dr. Lang recommends eating 10 servings of organic fruits and veggies a day, but this may not be realistic. This product produced by Dr. Lang has developed one of the first all-organic gluten-free and FODMAP-free superfood. It's called Fortify Organic Blue-Green Superfood. It's simple to take. Drink one serving a day to get 12 different superfoods. It's compatible for people with IBS since it's FODMAP-free. Perfect for anyone who needs a fruit and vegetable boost. Right now, Fortify is offering 25% off this superfood product. Go to fortify.com. That's fortify.com. Use promo code RADIO and receive the 25% discount. Eat healthy, be healthy. Fortify.com. Keeping America fit and healthy during this time of precautionary change.
And now, the fine folks at In God We Trust Painting are reminding motorists to slow down around child-filled areas. Always drive with caution, courtesy, and above all, common sense. This tip is from In God We Trust Painting. For all your residential, commercial, interior or exterior painting, pressure washing, and more, call today, 813-506-3814.
Hey, Dave.
813-506-3814.
Dave, you there?
Come on Facebook. That's In God We Trust Painting. They're people.
Okay, I need to make an adjustment. You got to turn your gate down a little bit. The gate's a little bit too tight.
Florida A&M University Medical Marijuana Education.
You know what I'm talking about, where it says downward expander.
And this radio station.
See that on the front?
Marijuana is legal. Can I use it in Florida? Nah, it's illegal here. 20 grams or less is a misdemeanor, and more than 20 grams.
It says downward expander, compressor.
Well,
it's like right next to each other. There's LEDs underneath each one.
Now that's legal, but talk to your doctor first to see if it's a qualifying condition and if medical marijuana is even right for you. I will, thanks.
Are you there yet?
Now, the fine folks at Action Remodeling and Building are reminding all motorists to save the text message.
There's more to the left.
It's not going to cause an accident.
You don't have much time, so I'm trying to make this quick.
Text and drive. This safety tip is from Action Remodeling and Building. Your number one.
Yeah, you want EXP threshold. What's that set at?
We take action. Call for a free estimate at 813-325.
Oh, over at 0? Okay, that should be at 12 o'clock.
That's Action Remodeling and Building, reminding you to never text and drive.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
The following message is sponsored by the Florida Department of Elder Affairs.
That's better. That's much better. Now, where it says comp ratio,
beneficiaries are having difficulty keeping up.
Where do you have that at?
The Department of Elder Affairs Shine program may be able to help. Shine counselors can.
Okay, where's comp threshold? Which is right next to expander threshold.
Your Medicare Part D costs.
Where's that at?
Information. Call 1-800-963-5327.
Okay, set it at 9 o'clock.
Go to floridashine.org.
Okay, then we're ready to come on. All right.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gornoski. So glad to be with you here. We're talking with attorney Shon Hopwood of Georgetown University. He's a professor there. And we're talking about his work in criminal justice, what he's doing in that field to make a difference in the lives of people who are behind bars, oftentimes with unjust sentencing. He was critical in the First Step Act and its development and passage in the White House with a bipartisan team of people who were concerned with the sentencing of people who are in there for nonviolent crimes. And so I wanted to ask you, Shon, what do we need to know about the Barr memo that people have talked about, where he's issued 2 memos and it's trying to get people more opportunities to come home?
Well, I think those memos should, especially in light of the news today, should be viewed skeptically. It looks more like the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Prisons is putting up some window dressing to alleviate concerns about the threat of COVID in federal prisons, but not much is being done about it. And they're certainly not getting enough people out of the prisons in order for, people that are remaining in the prison to do social distancing. And, it's always a struggle to get policymakers to let people out of prison early. But I think the thing that should be truly shocking to people is, most of these federal prisons are located in small rural towns. Once COVID gets in the prison, the staff is going to bring it right back out into those surrounding communities. And those are the communities least equipped to be able to handle a big, huge outbreak of coronavirus. And we're seeing that already with a prison in Louisiana, a prison in North Carolina, a prison in Ohio, and certainly there are some prisons down in Florida that it looks like they may have outbreaks as well. And I think people are wondering, what's the federal government going to do? And right now, they're just not doing enough and quickly enough.
So, have you been able to work with people on the ground that need this relief to get home away from the fatal pandemic situation in the prison? And what have you been hearing on the day-to-day stories you're seeing?
Yes, what we're doing right now is going to the one branch of government that can actually fix some of this, which is the federal judiciary. And we're filing lawsuits, both people I'm affiliated with and the ACLU and others are both filing lawsuits against some of these prisons, but also filing motions for compassionate release back to people's judges. When these judges impose sentences on these people, particularly for nonviolent offenses, they didn't think their sentence would be retroactively converted into a death sentence because of COVID-19 and the federal prison system. And so many judges are reconsidering whether it was wise to even send people to federal prison to begin with. And we're seeing a huge number of federal judges grant release for people and cutting their sentence of time served and getting them out of the prison system. Unfortunately, to do that, you have to litigate one case at a time before one judge at a time, and it just we won't be able to get enough people out quickly enough to alleviate the threat. That's one of the reasons why we really need the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Prisons to step up and do what's necessary and release enough people to keep the prisons and the people that work there and the people that live around those prisons safe.
So what's so hard about these folks at the top? I don't get it. Why is it so hard for them to let go of people's lives in this kind of life and death situation? Why do they have to cling to such stubborn callousness? It's like they're obsessed with controlling people. They love to have people under their domain or something. I don't understand it. Where do these people get their ethics?
A couple things. Yeah, I think it's one, they don't view the people who have committed crimes as people. If you viewed the people in prison as people, you would never do what you're doing, which is pretend like you're trying to keep them safe, but actually not doing so. Right. And then I think they think that, they're always concerned about if someone is released early and they do get out and commit a new offense, which if you release enough people early, that's bound to happen. They're worried about the political repercussions of that. Rather than just telling the American people that, listen, 95% of the people we send to federal prison are coming home one day. and you release enough people and somebody may get out and commit a new crime, but that is not reason to put thousands of people at risk, both that live in those prisons, work in those prisons, and live around those prisons. And I just think the Department of Justice has not done a good job of explaining that to people, in part because I don't know that they believe it. I also think that they believe that if we cut one person's sentence one day short, that is going to signal weakness to people who are thinking about committing crimes. But, that view of deterrence doesn't really match up with the data that we see, which is that most people don't even know half of those 5,000 federal offenses are even federal crimes. They certainly don't know that, people may get out early because of COVID. That would not make anyone think, oh, well, I should go out and commit a crime today because I won't face punishment. But I think the Department of Justice believes that.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like if you put people in dehumanizing situations, and of course you can speak more about the reality of that having been in there yourself, you put people in dehumanizing situations, you put them in solitary confinement for petty things and little things. You make them forced to use violence or the threat thereof to survive the tribal atmosphere there. And then you scratch your head when they come in with a nonviolent crime, and the very, very rare few come out early and maybe they do a violent act. And then you scratch your head, I wonder what happened. And it's just so stupid to me that these fools, they try to selectively take a story of a guy, oh, this one person, did something horrible, because we let them out. So see, that's proof that, why don't we go ahead and put alcohol prohibition? How about all the people who are addicts of alcohol? Just lock them up right now. And then if we give them early release, I'm sure one of those people might hit someone. This is kind of stupid logic. And this is the people that run this country thinking like this in our states?
Yep. Well, the person that gets out and commits a new offense makes the headline. A person that gets out and has learned from what happened to them and goes on and has a successful life doesn't make it into the news media. Unless they become a Georgetown law professor. And so, I think some of it is most Americans aren't aware how many people are getting out and doing the right things and turning their life around, and they only see the bad ones. And then that's what their view of people in prison becomes, is that, anyone that's gone to prison is just a matter of time before they get out, commit a new offense, and re-victimize people. And that's just simply not true.
So what can people know about the experience of being in prison like you went through? And how many years were you there? And just tell people a little bit about the reality of the situation there, not what they hear about on television and fiction.
Yeah, so I was in federal prison for nearly 11 years. And what I'd tell you is, I grew up in a family where no one had been to jail, let alone prison. And we, myself included, thought, prison is where the evil people go and the worst of the worst. But then I got to prison, and it wasn't the worst of the worst, and it wasn't evil people. It was mostly just people that, for whatever reason, made some bad choices. Some of them didn't have many choices to begin with, but most of them would have the power to turn it around. They just needed some help. And, prison is not the place that makes people better. The great irony of the American criminal justice system is the longer someone spends in corrections, the least likely they are to come out and be corrected. And it's not a surprise. You take someone away from everyone they love, out of their community, put them into a small area with a bunch of other similarly situated people who have also made bad decisions, and, there's the present threat of violence. Well, what could possibly go wrong? Mm-hmm. And that's why, oftentimes when we send people to prison thinking it's going to make them better, it actually just makes them worse.
So, how do we break through to the people who seem to be in the way of humanity here? I think we're going to look back at the mass incarceration practices that we're doing, and we're going to say, in a very short history, people are going to look back and say, in 2020, you were still doing that kind of barbaric practice?
Yes, I do. Serious? I think it's the civil rights issue of our day. I think, people don't realize how many Americans are cycled through the criminal justice system every year, and how, the protections that we once had are we have really lost over time. Take one of the biggest protections, the right to a jury trial. That right was so important that the framers of the Constitution put it both in the body of the Constitution and in the Bill of Rights. They wrote it twice. And yet, you look at cases today, 95 to 98% of cases decided in state and federal courts are decided by plea agreements and guilty pleas, because the government can put so much time over someone's head if they exercise their right to a jury trial and lose, that no one, even if they're innocent, wants to roll the dice and take the chances at a jury trial.
Right.
And so, we have lost some of the protections we once had over the years, and in part because, policymakers have listened too much to the Department of Justice, as if they are the only and sole experts on the criminal justice system.
So do you see, Trump had made a comment on some press conferences that he was looking at the idea of letting elderly inmates in the federal prison come home sooner because of this. Do you think that that's still something that's a possibility, or do you think that he's just basically deferred to Attorney General Barr and that little memo is all we're going to get here with this?
I don't know. I haven't, I know the White House is busy working on a number of different issues. I hope they get involved, and I hope they say something to the Department of Justice, but I'm uncertain about, what they're willing to do and how much they're willing to risk, alienating the Attorney General. And so I don't know what the White House will do. I hope they will step up and see that the DOJ's response so far has been completely inadequate. And I honestly don't think things are going to change until we have a large-scale outbreak in the communities in and around federal prisons.
So
put it this way, I think we could see 30% of people in federal prison die, and there wouldn't be that many Americans that would care one bit.
Right.
Now, they will care if the outbreak extends outside of the prison into local communities that surround those prisons. But I have a lot of reluctance to think that, most Americans are caring about what happens to people in prison.
Well, Shon, as a person that grew up with a pastor as my dad, it reminds me of the story of the demoniac that Jesus heals his mental illness. And then it says the crowd, his town where this guy had been walking around hitting himself with rocks, possessed and cast out of the community. When Jesus restores them to a sound mind, the community, it says, is terrified of that. They're not happy. They're terrified. And I think that's the problem, Shon. With a lot of folks in America today, they still haven't gotten over their need for a scapegoat. And they like the fact that there are some people who can be pushed down and to be thrown away like trash. It makes them somehow feel better or safer or more superior or more morally righteous because they're not the one in that situation. They like that, and that's it's
well, there is no group of people in this country that should be more against mass incarceration than our churches. You cannot believe in the gospel of grace and think it's just for the people that go to church, but not for the people that are in prison.
Yeah.
And I tend to try to remind people that the Apostle Paul was not the greatest of guys either before his conversion, and yet, he got grace. And so why wouldn't we give that to other people?
Yeah, it's very true, Shon, and I appreciate what you're doing. And, Jesus says, do not resist evil with violence, and that means if you think it's evil to sell marijuana or what have you, you're not allowed to resist it with violence. And putting people in cages is a violent act, and keeping them there when there's a pandemic raging and they can't escape is a despicable act. And it's a shame on this country, and I hope that the American people will wake up and not allow these politicians to just make a mockery of humanity in this moment.
Yep.
Thanks for your time, Shon. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me, David. You have a good day.
You too. We'll continue live on A Neighbor's Choice. Up next, we're going to find out about what you can do about this broken, disgusting system that we call justice. We'll have Catherine Barnard with us. She's an attorney, and she works with jury trials. We're going to get her reaction on the new Supreme Court ruling that came down yesterday. Don't miss it.
Hi, I'm Cheryl. Welcome to Fountain View Estates, one of Tampa's premier manufactured home retirement communities. We feature 2 resort-style swimming pools, large 16-person jacuzzi, pickleball courts, a ballroom, clubs, classes, and a dog park. You'll be just minutes away from the West Chase area, outstanding golf, great shopping, dining, arts, and entertainment. Fountain View Estates offers several new homes under $120,000 with large open floor plans, designer color schemes, fine wood cabinets, updated appliances, and modern flooring. With any new home purchase, you'll receive 6 months free lifestyle fees as well as 3.99% financing. Visit us at 8800 Berkshire Lane, just south of Linebaugh Avenue off Sheldon Road. Call 844-515-3903 or Google Fountain View Estates to book a tour online. Come discover what our residents already know. There's a fountain of youth at Fountain View Estates.
My name is Roz. Most people know me as a spokesperson for 1-800-ASK-GARY. The driver made a left turn onto ongoing traffic and I hit her. Once I got out of my vehicle and I was able to stand up, then I started feeling pain elsewhere. I had to think, call 1-800-ASK-GARY. They were on the ball, helping me find legal and medical help. They have thousands of other people, but they make you feel like you're their top priority. I made the call. I now tell other people to make.
Non-attorney spokesperson.
They say it should be impossible for bumblebees to fly because their wings are too small for their bodies. But bumblebees don't care. They just fly. Bright Expectations is dedicated to helping our Florida residents with special needs and unique abilities find the resources, support, and inspiration that they and their families need to break barriers and achieve their dreams. Visit www.brightexpectations.com to start your journey today.
This message is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health, the Florida Association of Broadcasters, and this radio station.
A Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm your host, David Gornoski. We're live, and we're talking about criminal justice. We're talking about our prison system, because how you treat the least of these is how you show the measure of your character. And the people who are forgotten so often in the belly of the justice system, I think, unfortunately, are so often forgotten by the rest of the society. But the unfortunate thing is that's changing. People are becoming more aware. People are becoming more conscious of their spirit, and they're conscious of their humanity. And for those who are in prisons, who we were told to keep in mind and to visit. And so now I want to turn to an attorney, someone who works in trials every day, in criminal jury trials. Catherine Barnard. She joins us from Georgia. How you doing, Catherine?
Hey, David. I'm pretty great, even though I haven't been to court since March 12th. So I don't know how much of an attorney doing trials I really feel like right now.
Yeah. So what's going on in that business right now? What happens? Everybody's just on hold in jail and stuff, or how does that work?
That's basically how it is. We have had our state of judicial emergency extended until May 13th, so only essential matters are being taken up, which there has been some breadth to that. The Supreme Court of Georgia actually held oral arguments via Zoom this week, and they're continuing to do that. But overall, jury trials are out, calendar calls are out, and most courts are not resuming until after May 13th.
Wow. So it's kind of a different, surreal moment here. But you know, the thing that really bugs me about that is that, you know, from the different things that I've engaged in media, a lot of folks tell me that they get, you know, I'm just interviewing folks they've been traumatized by spending a week or 2 weeks in a jail. The kind of things they see, the experiences they experience, the violence that they see. These are people who've done nothing violent in their lives. Many of these people were people who were raised in churches, and very sheltered folks just got into a wrong spot. They get thrown into a jail without having any conviction, and just that small window of being there for a few days can give them what appears to be PTSD in a lot of cases. And I think that's really sad that we have such a barbaric, brutish way of handling people, especially when it's a nonviolent thing that they're being accused of, you know?
Well, I think a lot of great thinkers have said that a society by the way it treats its prisoners, and that's certainly true. But we have really compounded that in the modern United States by making so much of our jail population made up of people prosecuted for victimless crimes. So certainly there are people in jail who need jail. They need to be treated fairly while they're in there. But we've amassed hundreds of thousands of people who have not even been accused, and yet they're still behind bars.
Yeah, one of the things that I find disturbing is just the fact that so many people have been conditioned by groupthink and by media tropes and things like that, doesn't matter if they broke the law, they should do the time. You hear that mantra a lot, and that's why, I mean, I've had people say that for people who are serving life sentences for being involved in marijuana distribution, and I think to myself, they don't care. What they're doing is kind of like the old Pharisee move where it's like, well, technically you're helping this person who's in really dire help, but you're helping them on the Sabbath, so therefore you have broken the law, and to hell with you. That's what they think of people. And I think there's a real disgusting evil when humans go to that point,
Well, I certainly agree with you, but one of the things we've seen since this coronavirus crisis is there have been a lot of measures, very justly, to get people out of jail, and I have supported those. I'm really glad to see people who are being held pending trial being released. It's very hard to get hand sanitizer and keep yourself and your property clean while you're in jail. So certainly anyone who has not who is not a danger to society, we need to get them out. But I do think the flip side is, jails can serve a purpose, and we certainly should not imagine that everyone should be let out of jail simply because of a crisis. People who have actually hurt other people, they have earned being treated separately from other individuals, and that can sometimes get lost in the conversation.
Yeah, I think so. So one of the things that's in the news that I wanted to get your take on is the Supreme Court ruled this week. And Neil Gorsuch made a very fiery statement there that he wrote the opinion for. And it says basically they're saying that if you're going to have a jury conviction, it needs to be unanimous.
Well, and this was a very interesting decision, Ramos versus Louisiana, that just came out, and it's been getting a lot of discussion for a lot of reasons. One is, of course, jury unanimity. It's a very important thing. There have only been 2 states that have not had that requirement already, Oregon and Louisiana, and those were the 2 that were being dealt with in this decision. But, one of the things that keeps popping up for me is, yes, jury unanimity is important, but we have to remember that the federal government has found that you don't have a constitutional right to trial by jury for certain offenses. In the federal system and in some states, you can be imprisoned for up to 6 months, and they can charge you with multiple 6-month offenses and not give you any right to trial by jury.
So what did some of those crimes that you can be accused of and not have a jury trial include? Do you have some examples?
Well, I hate to distract too much from Ramos and all the interesting matters going on there, but I know that federal obstruction charges where you can get 6 months or less, you can be required to do a bench trial rather than a jury trial. And the rationale for that is that it's considered a petty offense. But to me, again, 6 months of your life, that's pretty significant. And one of the things I will say about Georgia is our Constitution specifically provides that whenever your liberty is at risk, you can get a jury trial on a speeding ticket in Georgia.
Wow. And that's something that you're saying the federal government doesn't afford for a lot of criminal offenses on the books that have jail time with it.
That's correct. And unfortunately, even in Georgia and other places, we also have municipalities that can charge people with a violation of an ordinance and threaten to put them in jail for 6 months or a year and not give them a jury trial on that, which that's actually something that we are exploring through several cases that are moving their way through the system now. But I just want to remind everyone, in the context of discussing this new unanimous jury requirement from the Supreme Court, there still are some charges that the government says you can't have a jury trial on at all, which to me is a blatant violation of the clear terms of the Sixth Amendment that clearly states in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a jury trial. And if you are being prosecuted and having 6 months of your life potentially taken away, that's a criminal prosecution.
We're speaking with attorney Catherine Barnard. We're going to unpack some more implications with this new Supreme Court decision this week. Don't miss it. We'll be right back in a moment.
Guys, the physicians and staff at Center for Men's Health want you to know that C4MH.com is open and will remain open throughout this whole ordeal. C4MH.com has taken a multitude of steps to make sure that their offices are the safest places that they can possibly be. And here are just a few of the items that make that statement a fact. C4MH.com treats all offices with Microban 24. Now, that's
hey, Dave,
the
it's Steven.
Antivirus disinfectant available today. And unlike
You there?
any other disinfectant, Microban 24 kills viruses for 24 hours after
Dave, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. You're on the video screen too.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I need to talk to you. Turn your mic level down. It's still too hot coming this way on the board. Either channel 1 or the main out.
C4MH.com.
Okay, go ahead. Talk now.
Go ahead. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Bring it down just a little bit more.
Safe is the way it's always been at C4MH.
Right.
I'm a patient at C4MH.com.
That's good right there. Good. And we're hearing the fan. That's the only trouble with that shotgun mic, man. It's going to pick up every noise in the room. I hear thumping too. It sounds like somebody's bumping it. You really need, it's too bad you just can't use the RE20 next to you turned sideways. I mean, it's radio. Yeah, that'd be much better. There's nothing to adjust really for that. You know, just what I did the other day. I mean, yeah, it must have went away if you didn't hear it. The last caller.
We're hearing it. Yeah.
The Army National Guard plays a vital role in your community.
Yeah,
we're on the front lines supporting essential
not sure what that could be, because everything is. There's no more adjustments to make on the thing.
Keeping communities safe,
I don't know.
Making a difference.
We don't know. There's not any more adjustments to make.
Always there. Learn more about part-time service in the Army National Guard.
Also.
By the Florida Army National Guard.
Turn you know that gate adjustment I told you about? It said expander threshold.
So you've decided to jump into the
XP threshold
with a podcast.
Okay, turn it to about
seeing a handful of downloads,
let's say 11 o'clock position.
Time to air your podcast on radio to give it the reach it deserves. Thousands will hear it, not just a few. Call today to find out
put it 12
more how we can bring
12
an
o'clock.
audience to your podcast on this station. 813-250-3883.
Okay, that's good. That might help a little bit. We're still hearing that fan. That's the thing, even though it's low. Any noise in that room it's going to pick up because it's not a dead room, and you got a mic that's far away from you. Yep. So when you go back with the other mic, you'll be good.
A few simple steps. Notice families under stress. Offer a helping hand. Give your time. Talk about healthy child development. Connect a family with resources. Contributing to a great childhood can be as easy as being a good neighbor. For more, PreventChildAbuseFL.org. This message is sponsored by the Ounce of Prevention Fund of Florida, the Florida Association of Broadcasters, and this radio station.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gornoski. Happy to be with you here. And we're talking about criminal justice in this hour. We heard from attorney Shon Hopwood. He's a professor at Georgetown University about what they're doing to try to help get people early release for those who are stuck in prison for petty nonviolent things in a situation that could be a death sentence by a barbaric and brutish part of society called government that continues to be behind the curve in terms of human evolution for basic human dignity. But we're having Catherine Barnard on right now, and we're unpacking the implications of this new Supreme Court decision that came out this week, showing that they're making the case that there needs to be unanimous decisions whenever you're going to convict someone of a jury trial. Can you unpack some of the implications that means for folks in everyday life?
Absolutely. So this is Ramos versus Louisiana that we're talking about, with a decision that was written by Neil Gorsuch, which I have to say, he is doing such a better job on protecting the Bill of Rights than I think some of the other people who had been proposed for his position, like noted drug warrior Merrick Garland. So really, as I read through Gorsuch's decision, it's actually very good as Supreme Court decisions go. There's a lot of respect for basic human rights. There's a lot of respect for the tradition of jury trials and the importance of using them as a check on the government. So with that said, it is a very unusual decision. It's a 6-3 with Alito, Roberts, and Kagan making up the dissent. And then there are two concurrences within the majority decision. So you got a lot of justices writing about a lot of things. And one of the issues is, of course, stare decisis. You know, how much respect do you have to give to decisions that have already been made? And so one of the big points in Ramos is that Oregon and Louisiana, they are the two states that had been doing non-unanimous jury verdicts. In Oregon, you could convict with 11-1, and in Louisiana, you could convict with 10-2. That is, two people disagreeing with the government's prosecution, and the person, just like Mr. Ramos, could still be convicted of murder or other very serious crimes. And there had been a decision back in 1972, Apodaca versus Oregon. And I looked up the original oral argument to make sure I was pronouncing that correctly. It is Apodaca versus Oregon. And that was when the Supreme Court found, hey, it's okay to convict somebody even if they have non-unanimous juries. And so this decision reverses Apodaca. It says, that's not good law anymore, and nobody can be convicted in a federal court or a state court, any of the 50 state courts or territories, unless every member of that jury agrees.
Now, wouldn't some people who are federalists and advocates of, having state power here, would they say that this is intervening too much with the federal government making this kind of decision for the states too?
It's certainly possible, but given the very limited number of states that had even been trying to push, frankly, this nonsense of suggesting that you can have a jury trial, but not everybody has to agree in order for the government to get its conviction, I think there's not a lot for advocates of states' rights to be concerned about here. One of the things I think beyond the jury issue that you can definitely see being set up by the multiple concurrences and the dissent are the way that the court is planning to rule on future issues that will come before it. A lot of people have brought up affirmative action, voting rights lawsuits, possible abortion lawsuits, possible attempts to overturn Roe versus Wade. So I think if you read through the multiple decisions, the multiple opinions from all of the different justices, you really see they're setting things up for that debate. And so the ones who are saying, oh, no, no matter how bad the previous decision is, let's stick with it because stare decisis is so important. You can see that those are, Justice Kagan may be setting up to try to protect Roe versus Wade later on. So, we can certainly talk about all of the, very interesting history of jurisprudence, but a lot of this comes down to political questions that the court may be ruling on in the next few years.
Yeah, so for folks who find themselves on a jury and they feel like the sentence or the law is unjust, it's wanting to butcher someone's life, put them in a violent cage for a nonviolent choice, and they feel that to separate that person from their children or their little daughter or little baby would be the most disgusting thing they could do. And so basically they're using their moral faculties to work through that instead of just going along with the jury blindly. when they're in that moment and they're thinking that way and they're deciding and they're deliberating, if they are the one holdout or one or two holdouts to a guilty, everybody else is saying guilty, and there's just no budging the people. There's two saying not guilty, and the rest are saying guilty. What happens? Is it just a mistrial, or what do they do?
Well, now it will have to be a mistrial. Even in Oregon and Louisiana, they will not be able to say, all right, you've got 10, you've got 11, that's good enough. And one of the parts of Justice Gorsuch's decision that I thought was particularly good is he's talking about hung juries and talking about the way that the Supreme Court had previously discussed them. And they mentioned, not having hung juries is a benefit. And Justice Gorsuch actually points out, it's not clear whether just avoiding hung juries is necessarily itself a benefit. And he's not mentioning jury nullification. He's not mentioning, jury independence. But he is touching on that principle of, just because a jury can't come to a conclusion, that doesn't mean that's a bad outcome. It may be that a hung jury was the best and most just outcome in a particular case.
So when they have these hung juries, do they have another trial again, or do they usually not go with another trial?
That is up to the prosecutor, and I had seen it go all sorts of ways. One case where I had a mistrial, it ended up the prosecutor later came back with a very favorable plea offer that my client very much wanted to take because it allowed him to get out. So sometimes a hung jury will prompt a different kind of resolution of the case as the state reevaluates its evidence. Sometimes the state will go forward with a second prosecution, or in other cases, I have one where I think we have actually just hit the statute of limitations where the state can no longer go forward. They promised they would go forward after a hung jury, but it's been 4 years and they haven't done anything.
Wow. So where should people go given the situation that has uncovered today with the Supreme Court? Where should people do to kind of prepare themselves to be a fully informed jury member should they be selected or have the opportunity to serve on a jury for a criminal case like you handle every day?
Well, if you've got any interest in juries, reading the Ramos versus Louisiana opinion is interesting. Justice Gorsuch really goes into the history of the importance of juries and getting everyone to agree. It's worth a read. But certainly keep an eye out in the future for more arguments about why every single criminal prosecution should involve a jury trial. I think this decision has set that up as an option, and we should pursue it.
Catherine Barnard, I appreciate your commentary and your thoughts. We'll continue to look into this issue because I think juries serve as a last vestige for real accountability, real governance by the people if they would only know what they really have in front of their hands. Thanks for what you're doing, Catherine, in that field.
Thanks for having me on, Jason.
A Neighbor's Choice will continue in just a moment. Don't go anywhere, but remember, in the meantime, perfect love casts out all fear. I'm David Gornoski. We'll see you in just a moment.
Your local sports station.
Let's do this.
Hey, Dave.
Sports Talk 1040, The Team. WHBO, Pinellas Park.